In today's video, I want to share a story about one of those rare moments that arrives quietly, without warning, yet somehow changes the way you see everything afterward. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. There were no flashing signs announcing that life was about to shift. Instead, it unfolded in the kind of silence most people overlook, and maybe that's why it stayed with me for so long. Some experiences don't burst into your life like a storm. They drift in slowly, like the last light of evening, slipping through an open window. At first, they seem ordinary, harmless, easy to ignore, until suddenly they're not. Before we begin, take a moment to like and subscribe. If you've ever experienced a moment that changed everything without making a sound, then this story may stay with you long after the video ends. The evening began like dozens of others before it. The day had been warm, the kind of late summer day that leaves traces of sunlight lingering long after sunset begins. Outside, the neighborhood seemed wrapped in a peaceful stillness. The distant sounds of traffic had faded. Birds had already settled into the trees. Even the wind felt softer than usual. I stepped onto the porch and paused. The wooden boards beneath my feet still carried the day's warmth. The sky above was painted with shades of amber and fading gold, slowly surrendering to the approaching blue of night. For a moment, I simply stood there and enjoyed the quiet. Then I noticed the box. It sat near the steps, nothing special at first glance, just a plain cardboard package. Yet something about its presence felt oddly significant. Maybe it was the way it had been left there. Maybe it was the strange feeling in my chest that I couldn't explain. Or maybe it was because he was already standing beside it. Ethan. He was crouched near the package, studying the shipping label as if it contained some great mystery waiting to be solved. The sight made me smile. There was something familiar about him that always seemed to put people at ease. He wasn't the loudest person in a room. He never tried to be the center of attention. Yet somehow people noticed him anyway. Maybe it was his calm nature. Maybe it was the way he listened when others spoke. Or maybe it was simply because genuine kindness has become so rare that it naturally stands out. Whatever the reason, he had a presence that made ordinary moments feel a little less ordinary. He glanced up and caught me watching. That familiar half-smile appeared immediately. Not a practiced smile. Not the kind people wear for appearances. A real one. The kind that reaches the eyes. For reasons I couldn't explain, seeing it made the evening feel warmer. "Well," I said, leaning casually against the doorway, "since you're already down there, would you mind helping me bring that inside?" His smile widened slightly. "Of course. No complaints. No questions. Just a simple answer." He stood and lifted the box with ease before carrying it toward the house. As he passed through the doorway, his shoulder brushed lightly against mine. It was nothing. An accident. The kind of brief contact people experience every day without giving it a second thought. Yet for some reason I noticed it, and once I noticed it, I couldn't quite forget it. The air inside the house felt different afterward. Not dramatically different, just different, warmer somehow, quieter. Like the room itself had become aware of something neither of us was ready to put into words. Ethan placed the package near the end table and glanced around uncertainly. For a second, he looked as though he was deciding whether he should stay or leave. I surprised myself by speaking before he could make that choice. "Would you like some water?" He looked over. "Sure." His voice remained calm, but there was a softness to it that felt unusually noticeable in the silence. I moved toward the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed quietly as I opened the door. Ice shifted inside the dispenser. Tiny sounds, ordinary sounds, yet somehow every detail seemed sharper than usual. As I filled the glass, I became strangely aware of my own movements, the sound of water, the cool surface of the counter, the fading light filtering through the windows. When I turned around, Ethan was watching. Not intensely, not uncomfortably, simply present. And somehow that felt more powerful than either of us expected. I handed him the glass. For the briefest moment, our fingers touched. A simple accident, a fraction of a second. Yet the contact sent a small ripple through the stillness surrounding us. Neither of us acknowledged it. Neither of us needed to. Some things are understood without being spoken. He took a sip and glanced around the room. "Nice place," I laughed softly. "You've been here before." "True. Then why are you acting like you're seeing it for the first time?" He smiled. "Maybe because today feels different." The answer hung in the air between us. Neither of us rushed to fill the silence that followed outside. The evening continued its slow transition into night. Inside, time seemed to move differently. The conversation drifted naturally from one subject to another. Nothing important, nothing life-changing, simple observations, small stories, shared laughter. Yet each passing minute seemed to carry an unexpected weight. Sometimes the most memorable moments aren't built from grand events, they're built from tiny details, a glance, a smile, a pause that lasts a little longer than expected, the realization that you're paying attention in a way you weren't before. And somewhere between the fading daylight and the quiet comfort of that evening, something shifted. Not all at once, not dramatically, just enough to make the familiar feel new, just enough to make the silence feel meaningful. And once that happens, you begin to understand something important. Life rarely changes in a single instant. Usually it changes one quiet moment at a time, and often you don't realize the importance of those moments until much later, when you're looking back and wondering exactly when everything started to feel different. The rest of the evening passed in a way that's difficult to explain. Not because anything extraordinary happened, but because sometimes the moments that leave the deepest marks on us are the ones that appear completely ordinary from the outside. The living room was quiet except for the distant ticking of the clock on the wall. Neither of us seemed eager to break the silence. Outside, darkness had fully settled over the neighborhood. Street lights cast long shadows across the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked before the world returned to stillness. Ethan leaned back against the couch and stared ahead for a moment. "You ever feel like life changes before you realize it's changing?" he asked quietly. I turned toward him. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly. "I don't know. It's just, sometimes you think everything is normal. Then one day you look around and realize nothing feels the same anymore." His words stayed with me, because deep down, I knew exactly what he meant. The strange thing about change is that it rarely announces itself. There's no warning, no dramatic music, no flashing sign telling you to pay attention. Instead, it slips quietly into your life and settles there until one day you wake up and realize you're seeing everything differently. For a while, we talked about simple things: dreams, regrets, plans for the future. The conversation drifted naturally from one subject to another. Hours seemed to disappear, and somewhere along the way, I realized something important. What made the evening special wasn't attraction. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't even the unexpected emotions I was trying to understand. It was connection, real connection. The kind that's becoming harder and harder to find in a world where everyone seems distracted. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely present, completely seen. And judging by the expression in Ethan's eyes, I wasn't the only one. Eventually, he glanced toward the clock. "Wow," I laughed. "What? It's late." I looked over and realized he was right. The evening had slipped away without either of us noticing. Neither of us moved immediately. Neither of us seemed ready for the moment to end. But every meaningful moment eventually reaches its final page. That's what makes it meaningful in the first place. Ethan stood slowly. "I should probably head home." The words sounded reluctant, as though even he wasn't convinced. I smiled. "Probably." For a second, neither of us said anything. Then he looked around the room one last time. The same room that had felt completely ordinary just a few hours earlier. Funny how quickly a place can become attached to a memory. Funny how quickly a memory can become attached to a person. When he reached the door, he paused, not dramatically, just enough to turn back. "Thanks for tonight." I folded my arms lightly. "For helping with the box?" He laughed. "For everything." There was honesty in his voice, the kind that can't be faked. I nodded. "Thank you too." For a moment, neither of us added anything else. There wasn't anything left to say. Some conversations don't end because words run out. They end because everything important has already been understood. Ethan stepped outside. The cool night air rushed briefly into the house before the door closed behind him. And just like that, he was gone. I stood there for several seconds staring at the doorway, listening, thinking, feeling. The house was quiet again, exactly as it had been before. Yet somehow it wasn't. The furniture hadn't moved. The walls were the same. The photographs still hung where they always had. Nothing had changed. And everything had changed. I walked back into the living room and sat down on the couch. The silence no longer felt empty. Instead, it felt full of echoes, fragments of conversation and smiles, thoughts that would stay with me long after the evening ended. Hours later, after the lights were off and the house had settled into darkness, I still couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the small moments, the laughter, the conversations, the feeling that somehow, without planning it, two people had understood each other in a way that rarely happens. Eventually, I realized something. The night had never been about romance. It had never been about crossing lines or creating complications. It was about being reminded that connection matters, that understanding matters, that sometimes the people who leave the biggest impact on our lives aren't the ones who arrive with fireworks and grand gestures. They're the ones who sit beside us during an ordinary evening and somehow make us feel less alone. Years from now, I probably won't remember every word we said. I won't remember what was on television. I won't remember what song might have been playing in the background. But I'll remember the feeling. The feeling that for a few quiet hours, time slowed down. The feeling of being fully present. The feeling of understanding and being understood. Because in the end, that's what stays with us. Not the noise. Not the drama, not the chaos. Just the moments that quietly change us. And sometimes those moments arrive on an ordinary summer evening, beside a cardboard box that seemed unimportant at first glance. Only later do we realize it wasn't the box that mattered. It was the memory that arrived with it. And some memories never really leave. They simply become part of who we are,